Okay, with the beaters they run a Nissan rear brake master cylinder, and in this case to get to the fitting we have to remove the master cylinder itself. So this is a 4mm Allen key. We simply remove these 2 screws. Okay, now because this bike's fitted with a hydraulic brake light switch on the master cylinder, firstly before we unscrew it we must unplug it, and then pull down the wires through the guide. And it's very important when undoing this brake light switch to turn the wires with the switch itself, otherwise you'll break the wires. Just to prevent the master cylinder dropping down and draining the fluid out of the top of it, we'll just return one of the screws in here just to hold it in position. Okay, for this process we use a tray to catch the excess fluid. I simply unclip the line from the swing arm and then carefully pull the line out and then drop it down and hold it lower than this point. And if you do that, when you loosen the caliper banjo bolt, the fluid will want to drain into the tray like so and not end up on your disc, which is very important. I'll also push this cloth into here just in case to prevent any disc, because it's crucial that you don't get the brake fluid on the disc itself or the pads, or you'll find your brakes won't work properly. Okay, now it's very important to make sure that the mating surfaces here are perfectly clean, so we'll clean these surfaces up so that it seals properly, being very careful that no contamination goes in that port. Because this is a dual control Clake, it comes supplied with 2 lines. One is for the slave cylinder to the pedal master cylinder, and that's this line here, and then the longer line runs from underneath the Clake unit all the way down to the caliper, and that's got the plastic sleeve on it that generally clips into swing arms. Okay, next we clip the plastic sleeve into the swing arm clips like so, and then making sure the line itself doesn't end up on the ground. We then place the new supplied sealing washers over the banjo bolt, one on that side, place the banjo bolt through the banjo fitting and put the other sealing washer on the other side. Then we rotate the banjo until it's in position, and then being careful to make sure not to cross thread it, we screw in the banjo bolt. Now we tighten this fitting. It's a 14mm ring. Okay, here we're trying to show you how to route the cable. This is the rear brake line, and you can see that it's held away from the shock absorber by the standard drain tube or vent tubes for the carby. It then goes up to the frame rails and is cable tied to the frame rail, and then we take it across on the outside of the petrol tank, cable tied again to the perimeter of the frame there. Then we've taken it down. This is to clear the tank so you can get the tank off and on easily without having to reposition any lines, to the fan there, and then up the frame. And at this point we've cable tied it to the steering head, the reason being so that it doesn't get snagged when the line goes from when the steering goes from lock to lock. The routing of this line will depend from bike to bike. It's really to keep the fundamental principles of keeping it away from the shock absorber so it can't get jammed in the springs, keeping it away from the hot exhaust, and making sure that you've got free access to things like carbies, tanks, and also very important is to test it lock to lock on the steering to make sure that the line is not going to get snagged on anything such as steering locks. Now we'll install the rear caliper line to the Clake itself, and this is done via the 8mm supplied banjo bolt. Again, we put one sealing washer underneath, put it through the banjo fitting, and then place the other new sealing washer over the top. Then we simply align the thing and carefully making sure that we don't cross thread it. Now what's very important when hooking up and tightening this fitting is to ensure that the fitting itself doesn't foul on the body. You can see if you run it back there, it'll start to foul on the body and it will not seal there. So you must push this back towards the handlebars and then tighten it up there. Now we're on to bleeding the back brake system. So first of all we remove the reservoir cover and then fill the reservoir about 3/4 full. So firstly we crack the bleeder nipple on the caliper and we leave that open. Okay, today we're using a power bleeder, which just makes life that much easier. It's a very simple device that just uses compressed air to create a vacuum, and it sucks through the brake fluid and therefore getting rid of the air. Now the first thing we do is again fold out the levers like so, and that just opens up the port a little bit more, and it'll hopefully give us a bit better flow and help us bleeding. Here we're using the power bleeder and topping up the reservoir at the same time. Okay, now we undo the bleeder for the brake, which is the forward one. And again, we just let gravity, let the fluid rise up and clear the air out of the port. We can see some air bubbles rising out of there. I just wipe it and let it and wait until there's no more air bubbles coming out, and then return the bleed screw. Okay, the Clake 2 features an adjuster which gives you clutch off the rear brake, so that when you pull in the brake lever, it starts to engage the clutch. Now what we do with this while we're bleeding is back that right off. Okay, now again, like the clutch, we're going to put the left-hand side of the handlebar lower than the right-hand side, and this naturally allows the air to come out the compensation port. Then we're going to pull the lever in to the bars, and we've got a little bit of brake pressure at the end, but not enough, and leave it there for a few seconds and then flick it out. Okay, and then hopefully this works the air, and there's a little bubble just came up then, out of the system, and we just keep repeating this. And typically bleeding takes patience. It can take a while. Sometimes things will bleed up really quickly, sometimes they can not bleed up quickly. So just be very patient, because it's incredibly important to get all the air out of the system. Again, like the brake, every so often it pays to fold the lever out and just work it, and you see a whole lot of air just came out then. Another technique of getting air out is to fold the lever outwards so the port's open, and then go around to the back of the motorcycle to the rear caliper. Okay, now if you very gently, with your thumbs on there, push on this sliding pin caliper and force the fluid back up the line, it can often clear all the air out of the system, but please don't press too hard and too quickly or you'll squirt brake fluid to the roof. Okay, now once that's done, what I like to do is go away and have a coffee, because what's happening is you're forcing air up the line, and say it only reaches to here, if you wait, the air bubbles will slowly rise up the line. Now, at the moment, we've got rid of most of the air, but we've still got a little bit of air in there, and a trick that I like to use is to cable tie the lever to the bars, just like so. Pull it in using your thumb, and then tighten the cable tie. Put the reservoir lid back on and leave it overnight. Okay, so we've had this cable tied overnight, so we've just come back, cut the cable tie and release the lever, and you see a little bit of air just came out. Marvellous. Now that's beautifully bled. Okay, now we've been bleeding the rear brake, and what people want to know is when all the air's out. And the easiest way to tell that is with the levers folded back into position like they are now, you place your thumb on the rocker and press, and you'll feel it go firm, and you basically can't push it anymore. And if you look at that, that's moving about 0.5 millimetre, looking at that rivet in relation to the body. Okay, now we've got the brake system fully bled. We'll just top the fluid up again, around about 3 millimetres from the top, because I like to overfill it. And then with a rag placed around it, I just carefully replace the lid, and it will overflow the fluid, but that will ensure that there's no air underneath it, so if you accidentally tip your motorcycle upside down, you won't get air in your brake system.